started with a raise. Not love. Not lust. Just a damn raise. 3 weeks ago, I was the happiest man alive. Or at least I thought I was. Emma had just gotten promoted at her job. She was glowing, ecstatic, high on her own success. She came home that night with champagne and a smile that could have lit up the whole city. We danced in our kitchen, barefoot, tipsy and laughing. I told her I was proud of her. She whispered she couldn't have done it without me. I believed her. God, I was such a fool. We'd been together 6 years. For living together. Talked about marriage, kids, houses with wraparound porches and Sunday pancakes. We were building something. Or at least I thought we were. After the promotion, things changed, but subtly. Too subtly for me to notice at first. She started coming home later. Said there were strategy meetings and networking dinners. At first, I didn't question it. I mean, it was a big step up. More responsibility, more pressure. I wanted to be supportive. Then came the new clothes. Tight, sleek, expensive. Clothes she wouldn't have worn 6 months ago. Perfume I didn't recognize. She told me it was part of the image she had to project now. Executive presence. Professional polish. I nodded. Smiled. Trusted. Then came the business trips. First to Chicago. Then LA. Then Miami. Every time she packed, she looked more excited. And every time she came back, she looked distant. Like some part of her hadn't come home with her. The first crack came when I found the necklace. It wasn't hers. I knew every piece of jewelry she owned. I'd bought most of them. This one was delicate, expensive, nothing like her usual style. It was in a little velvet box at the bottom of her work tote, under some papers. I waited 2 days before I asked. She didn't flinch. Said it was a gift from the company, part of a thank you for closing a major deal. But she looked away when she said it. My gut twisted. The next week, I started checking her phone. I hated myself for it. I'd never done anything like that before. But something inside me screamed that things weren't right. That something was rotten underneath all the shiny new surface. I was right. There were messages. Hundreds of them. From him. Mark Taylor. Her boss. The one who gave her the promotion. They weren't even trying to be discreet. Flirty texts, late-night confessions, blurry hotel room selfies. He called her baby. She called him sir. Couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. She came home that night with sushi and a kiss like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. Everything. I didn't confront her that night. Couldn't. My mind was spinning, drowning in images I never wanted to see. His hands on her waist, her lips whispering things I thought were only meant for me. I lay in bed beside her, pretending to sleep, while she scrolled through her phone with a soft smile on her face. Was she texting him? Was she reliving moments they shared behind my back? The silence between us was deafening. She curled up against me like she always did, her body warm, familiar, but I felt cold, frozen, like the man she touched wasn't me anymore. The next morning I called in sick to work. I couldn't face the world. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee until it went cold. I played those messages over and over in my head, each one a knife twisting deeper. I loved your presentation today, baby. Can't wait for our next trip. Just you and me. You looked so sexy in that red dress. I could see that dress in my mind. I remembered her wearing it for a company event. She made me take pictures of her before she left. I thought she wanted to impress the board. Now I knew she wanted to impress him. Later that day, I went digging deeper. Emails. Hidden photos. A second email account I didn't know existed. There it was, all of it, hotel reservations in his name, receipts for expensive dinners, selfies of them in robes, in bed, in places I had never been with her. She had a whole other life carved out in secret. And the worst part? She looked happy in those pictures. Happier than I'd seen her in months. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken accident. It was deliberate, repeated, intimate. That night I cooked dinner like usual. Sat across from her and asked how her day was. She smiled, told me about a conference call with New York, how demanding things were getting. I watched her lie to my face with the ease of a practiced actress. I wondered how long she'd been rehearsing, how long she'd been slipping into this role of loyal girlfriend while screwing her boss in five-star hotels. I almost asked her right then, almost screamed it across the table. But I didn't. I needed more. Not just proof I had that. I needed answers. I needed to know how it started, why she did it, why she chose him. I needed her to say it to my face, to look me in the eye and admit what she'd done. So I waited. And while I waited, I burned. Inside, I was crumbling. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Every time she touched me, I flinched. Every time she smiled, I saw the lie behind it. I was living with a stranger wearing my girlfriend's skin. And still, I kept pretending for one more day and then another. Until finally, I found what I was looking for. A flight confirmation. She was going to Denver. Alone, she said. For a leadership seminar. But I knew he'd be there. So I made a plan. And I followed her. I told her I couldn't get the time off work. I told her I hoped the seminar went well. I kissed her forehead at the airport and waved as she walked toward the gate with her sleek suitcase and tailored blazer, looking every bit the successful executive. I smiled, lied, just like she'd been doing to me for months. But I already had my ticket. Different airline, different gate. I boarded my flight 20 minutes later, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest, stomach twisting with every mile. I landed in Denver just before sunset, rented a car and drove straight to the hotel listed in her email. The Grand Avalon. 5 stars. Valet parking. Marble lobby floors that echoed beneath my shoes. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I hadn't planned that far. I just needed to see it. To see them. To make it real even if it shattered me. I checked into a motel a few blocks away. It was dingy, smelled like cigarette smoke and old regret, but I didn't care. I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling all night, imagining what they were doing just down the street. Her laughter. His hands. Her lips. My mind was a torture chamber and I had lost the key. The next morning I went back, sat in the cafe across from the Avalon, nursing a bitter coffee and watching the entrance like a hawk. Hours passed. My eyes burned. My body ached. And then there she was, Emma, dressed in a slim gray dress and heels I didn't recognize, smiling, radiant, and beside her him, Mark Taylor, mid-40s, tall, tan, too confident. He laughed at something she said and placed his hand gently on the small of her back as they walked through the revolving doors. Like he owned her. Couldn't breathe. Something inside me cracked. I followed them into the lobby. Kept my distance. They stood at the front desk, checking in. She didn't even hesitate when the receptionist handed them one key card. One room. One bed. She took it with a smile and leaned into him, whispering something that made him grin like a devil. Then they turned, walked toward the elevators and disappeared. I stood there for what felt like an hour, staring at the empty space they left behind. It was done. There was no coming back from this. No more lies, no more excuses, no more pretending. The woman I loved, no, the woman I thought I loved, was gone. Replaced by someone who could sleep in my bed at night and then spread her legs for her boss by morning. And the worst part? I didn't even recognize her anymore. I stumbled back to my car, shaking. I could have confronted her right there. Could have burst into the hotel room and torn the illusion to shreds. But I didn't. I needed something more. Something final. So I waited. Again. I parked nearby, waited until nightfall. Watched the lights in their window flicker on. Watched the shadows move behind the curtains. I saw her silhouette press against his. I saw the shape of betrayal played out in real time, like a cruel shadow play orchestrated just for me. I took photos. I recorded everything. I wanted her to see what I saw, to feel what I felt, to understand the damage she had done. Not just to me, but to us. Because whatever we had, it died in that hotel room, and I was the one left to bury it. The next morning, I checked out of the motel without a word. My hands were numb, my mind hollow. Felt like I'd aged 10 years in one night. The photos I took, their silhouettes tangled behind that curtain, the time-stamped evidence of her betrayal, they were still burning a hole in my phone. I didn't look at them again. I didn't need to. They were seared into my memory like scars across my vision. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Not the Emma I used to know, but the Emma that smiled for another man, touched him with the same hands that used to cradle my face, whispered lies with the same lips that once promised forever. The flight back home was a blur. I don't remember the people, the announcements, the landing. I just remember gripping the armrest like it could anchor me to reality, trying not to fall apart in front of strangers. When I walked into our apartment, everything looked the same, but it felt different, colder, like I was trespassing in someone else's life. Her jacket still hung by the door. Her perfume lingered in the air. Our bed was made like it always was, but I couldn't bring myself to touch anything. I sat in the living room for hours, staring at nothing, waiting for her return. I didn't eat, didn't drink. Just waited the way a man waits for the storm he knows is coming. And then, right on time, she walked through the door. Fresh from the airport, hair tied back, suitcase rolling behind her. She looked tired but satisfied, like a woman who'd had a productive trip. She smiled when she saw me. "I didn't think you'd be home this early," she said, setting her bag down. I said nothing. She walked over and kissed my cheek, light, familiar. I flinched. Her smile faltered. "Everything okay?" I looked at her for a long time before I spoke. I studied her face, her eyes, the curve of her mouth. I searched for the guilt, the shame, the slightest crack in the mask. But there was nothing. Just calm, calculated composure. That's when I realized she wasn't sorry. She hadn't come back with remorse. She came back thinking she got away with it. So I stood up, walked to the kitchen, picked up my phone from the counter and tossed it onto the table. Open. Screen facing up. The photo's right there. Her eyes dropped to it. And I saw it, the flicker. The panic. Just for a second. But it was enough. "What is this?" she asked, her voice suddenly brittle. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She picked up the phone, scrolled through the images, her fingers trembling slightly. Her face changed, first confusion, then dread, and finally cold resignation. She set it down gently and looked at me. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes were hard. "How long have you known?" I exhaled slowly. "Long enough." There was a beat of silence. Then she nodded like it was all just business. "Well," she said, "I guess we should talk." But I didn't want to talk. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she could do this to me, to us. I wanted to know when she stopped loving me, when she decided that power and sex and ambition were worth more than everything we'd built. But the words caught in my throat, because deep down I already knew the answers. She didn't cheat because of passion. She cheated because she could, because she wanted something more. And I wasn't part of it. We sat at the dining table across from each other, like strangers negotiating the terms of a truce. The same table where we'd shared countless dinners, laughed over wine, planned vacations, and dreamed about the future. Now it was just a battlefield of silence and shattered trust. She kept her hands folded like a child waiting for judgment. I could see the wheels turning in her head, calculating damage control, trying to find a way to spin the narrative. But I didn't need spin. I needed the truth, raw and ugly. "How long?" I asked finally, my voice low, steady. She hesitated. That was enough of an answer already. But she spoke anyway. "Almost 5 months." 5 months. That number hit harder than I expected. Not a weekend mistake. Not a single lapse in judgment. It was sustained. Ongoing. A secret life carved into my reality like a parasite. Every smile, every kiss, every "I love you" during that time, it was all tainted. All fake. Was it just sex? I asked, already knowing the answer. Her eyes darted away, then back. She sighed softly. "It started that way." Of course it did. They always say that, don't they? As if sex without emotion somehow makes betrayal less devastating. But the thing is, it never just stays physical. Not when it's repeated. Not when it's hidden. Not when it's nurtured in silence and lies. "So what is it now?" I pressed. "Love?" She didn't answer. And that silence? That was worse than anything she could have said. Because it told me everything. That maybe she didn't love him, but she certainly didn't love me anymore. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Was the promotion worth it? That made her flinch. For a moment, her mask cracked. "I didn't sleep with him for the promotion," she said quickly, defensive now. "I earned that on my own. What happened afterward, it just happened." "It just happened?" I echoed. "Is that supposed to make this easier to swallow?" Her eyes flashed with something, shame, maybe. Or maybe just annoyance at being caught. "I didn't plan this, okay? I didn't wake up one day and decide to cheat. Things were complicated. I felt stuck. You were always so safe, so stable, but I needed it. I cut her off. Excitement? Power? Validation? She didn't deny it. And that told me more than her words ever could. We sat in silence again, the distance between us now a canyon. I realized then that I didn't recognize the woman sitting across from me. She looked like Emma. She sounded like Emma. But the woman I loved, really loved, would have never done this. She would have come to me, talked to me, fought for us. Instead, she made her choice. Over and over again, every time she climbed into his bed. I can't do this, I said, finally standing up. I can't be in this house with you. Not anymore. She stood too, suddenly alarmed. Wait, what are you saying? I'm saying it's over. Her face twisted, shock, anger, maybe regret. You're just going to walk away? After everything? No, I said quietly. You already did. And with that I walked out the door. The cold air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside. It was dusk and the sky was painted with that heavy orange glow that always made our neighborhood feel nostalgic, like a scene from a memory I no longer belonged to. I didn't take the car. I walked. I didn't even know where I was going, I just needed to move, to feel the pavement beneath my feet and put distance between myself and the wreckage I just left behind. Every step was heavy. Every breath hurt. I felt like I'd been hollowed out, like whatever made me whole had been carved away in that conversation, piece by painful piece. I wandered for hours. Past familiar streets that now felt foreign, parks where we used to sit on lazy Sunday afternoons, coffee shops we used to visit when we were broke and in love. Every place held a ghost. Her laughter, her touch, her promises. And all of it was a lie. How do you process the death of something that's still breathing right in front of you? How do you mourn a life you're still technically living? Eventually, I ended up on a bench by the river. It was quiet, save for the soft ripple of water and the occasional chirp of a bird too stubborn to fly south. I sat there, numb, watching the water move like it held some kind of answer I couldn't find in myself. I thought about what we had. About how it started, messy, passionate, raw. I remembered the first time I saw her cry, how I held her and promised I'd never be the reason for her tears. And now here I was, the one broken, the one bleeding. She hadn't cried. Not once. That realization hit harder than anything else. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the indifference. The cold efficiency with which she destroyed everything we built. She didn't even fight for us. Didn't beg. Didn't ask for a second chance. She'd already made peace with her decision long before I found out. I was just the last one to catch up. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our old photos. Vacations, birthdays, silly moments caught in the kitchen. I stared at them like a stranger. Who were those people? When did she start pulling away? Was it gradual, so slow that I missed it? Or had she decided one day that I simply wasn't enough anymore? Maybe that was the cruelest part, knowing there was no dramatic shift, no blazing red flag. Just a slow, quiet erosion of love until all that remained was convenience. I wanted to text her. To scream. To ask how she could be so heartless. But I didn't. Because deep down I knew it wouldn't change anything. She'd already chosen someone else, chosen power, prestige, and passion over partnership, trust, and history. I was a chapter she'd closed. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to be part of a story where my worth was so easily forgotten. So I sat there, alone, letting the river take my silence. Letting the cold bite at my skin, reminding me that I was still here, still breathing. Broken, yes, but not done. Not finished. I didn't know what came next. But I knew it wouldn't be her. The days that followed were a blur. I stayed with my brother for a while, crashed on his couch, ignored his questions, and stared blankly at the ceiling during the long, sleepless nights. He didn't press me. Just handed me a beer now and then and gave me space to unravel. I appreciated that more than I could say. People think heartbreak is loud, screaming, crying, breaking things. But mine was quiet. Numb. I moved like a ghost, floating through the days, pretending to be okay when all I wanted to do was disappear into the cracks. I stopped going to work, called in sick, and then just never called again. I didn't care. Nothing felt important anymore. The job, the bills, the future, it all felt meaningless next to the betrayal that had hollowed me out. I deleted all her photos. Blocked her number. But it didn't help. Because the memories weren't in my phone. They were in my blood. In my bones. In the way I flinched when someone said her name, or the way I avoided our old street like it held a curse. Then, one evening she showed up. Unannounced. Uninvited. Unwelcome. I heard the knock and my stomach turned before I even opened the door. I knew it was her. I could feel it in my chest, in the way my heart clenched like a fist. And there she was, Emma. Standing on the porch, hair pulled back, eyes puffy like she'd been crying. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her choices was finally pressing down on her. I just want to talk, she said quietly. I didn't move. Didn't invite her in. Just leaned against the frame and waited. I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. I thought I wanted something else. I don't know what I thought. I stared at her. At the woman I once believed I'd grow old with. And I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. Just a cold, distant clarity. You didn't make a mistake, I said calmly. You made a decision. Repeatedly. She blinked, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was confused. He offered me something I thought I needed. Validation. Attention. I felt powerful for once and I got lost in it. But it didn't mean I stopped loving you. I shook my head slowly. Yes, it did. Maybe not all at once. But every time you went back to him, a little more of that love died. You just didn't notice until it was gone. She stepped forward. Please. Let me try to fix this. I'll quit the job. I'll cut him off. We can go to therapy, start over. No, I said firm. Final. She froze. The desperation in her eyes turned to shock, then to pain. I was yours, I continued completely. And you traded that for status and secrets. That doesn't get undone with apologies. Her voice cracked. So that's it? That's it, I said. She looked down, then back up. I never meant to hurt you. And that's when I felt something stir, something dark, something honest. You didn't just hurt me, I whispered. You destroyed me. She didn't argue. Didn't fight. She just stood there, tears on her cheeks, and nodded like she finally understood. Then she turned and walked away, her steps heavy with the weight of regret. And I stood there, watching her disappear into the night. Not with bitterness, but with relief. After she left, something shifted. Not immediately, not with fanfare or some dramatic epiphany. But gradually, like the way dawn creeps in through blinds after a sleepless night. I didn't feel better, exactly. Just emptier. But this time, the emptiness wasn't a wound, it was space. Space where she used to be. Space where pain had once lived. And for the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of her shadow pressing against my chest. I started doing small things, mundane things. Washing dishes. Folding laundry. Walking to the corner store for milk even though I didn't need any. Just to move. Just to reclaim some version of routine that didn't revolve around waiting for her to come home. My brother noticed the change. He didn't say much, but I caught him glancing at me differently, like he saw the pieces stitching themselves back together, however slowly. Then came the hard part, going back to the apartment. She'd moved out by then. Left her key on the counter, a note I never read beside it. I didn't want her words anymore. I'd had enough of them to last a lifetime. The space was eerily clean, like she'd erased herself on the way out. But her presence lingered in subtle ways, an indent in the mattress, a faint scent in the closet, an old receipt from a dinner I now knew she didn't share with me. I boxed up the past with methodical precision. Our framed photos. The mug she always used. The birthday cards we gave each other, now hollow echoes of promises broken. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad, but because I'd already cried everything I had. The grief had burned through me and left ash in its place. And from that ash, something else began to grow, not hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. I spent long nights alone, journaling, replaying every moment with new eyes. Not to torture myself, but to understand. To extract meaning from the mess. I realized I wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. I had been comfortable. Complacent. I gave her love, but maybe I stopped giving her surprise, spontaneity, that sense of being truly seen. But still, nothing I did justified betrayal. Her choice to step outside the bounds of what we built wasn't about me lacking. It was about her reaching for something she couldn't name until it was too late. People talk a lot about closure. About confronting the person who hurt you to get answers, to reclaim your peace. But I'd had my confrontation. And still, I had to find peace on my own. Because the truth is, closure isn't something they give you. It's something you take. Quietly. Fiercely. On your own terms. One night, weeks later, I stood in front of the mirror. Looked at myself. Really looked. I saw a man worn thin, eyes darker than I remembered, lines on his face that hadn't been there before. But I also saw something else, a quiet strength. A flicker of self-worth returning. A man who had been burned but not broken. And I knew then, I would be okay. Not today. Not tomorrow. But someday. Healing didn't arrive like a lightning strike. It came in fragments, quiet, unglamorous, often invisible to anyone but me. It came in the way I no longer reached for 2 coffee mugs in the morning. In how I stopped glancing at my phone, expecting a message that would never come. It came in choosing peace over resentment, solitude over toxic nostalgia. There were still moments that pulled me back, songs on the radio, scents in passing, women with the same haircut in a crowd, but those moments stopped feeling like knives. They became dull aches, reminders of a past life that no longer dictated my present. I started spending more time outdoors. Hikes, even short ones, became therapy. There was something about the trees, the raw air, the way the wind didn't care who I used to be or who she betrayed me for. Nature had no judgment. It simply allowed. And that permission to just exist, wounded, confused, healing, was something I hadn't given myself in months. Out there, surrounded by things that continued growing no matter what had been broken, I began to believe I could too. One day, while walking past a bookstore we used to love, I stopped. For a long time, I just stood there, staring through the glass like an outsider. I almost kept going. But then I walked in. I ran my fingers along the spines of novels, the scent of old paper thick in the air. It felt strange, standing there without her, but also liberating. That space was no longer just part of us. It was mine too. I bought a book, a collection of essays on resilience. I didn't even read the back cover. I just liked the way the word resilience felt in my hands. Later that week, I bumped into an old friend. He didn't know what had happened. Just asked how life was going. I hesitated, the lie forming out of habit, good, busy, same old, but I stopped myself. I told the truth. Maybe not all the gory details, but enough. Enough for him to see the storm I'd walked through. He nodded. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't offer cliches. Just listened. And that simple act, being heard, was more healing than I expected. The thing is, heartbreak isolates you. Makes you feel like your pain is singular, unique in its cruelty. But once I started talking, truly talking, I realized how many others had stood where I stood. Different faces, different betrayals, but the same raw ache. And slowly, I stopped feeling like a victim of my own story. I began to feel like a survivor of it. I donated what was left of her things. Gave away clothes, books, trinkets that once held meaning but now just collected dust. I didn't do it with anger. I did it with intention. Every item that left was a weight lifted, a chapter closed. I didn't need to punish her memory to free myself from it. I just needed to let it go. And one night, as I stood on my balcony watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again. Gratitude. Not for the pain. Not for the betrayal. But for the fact that I came through it. Scarred, yes, but still standing. Still capable of love. Still open to something new, something honest. And that, after everything, was a victory all its own. Time passed, not in dramatic bursts, but in quiet increments. A sunrise. A cold morning coffee. A familiar song that no longer hurt. I moved to a smaller apartment on the other side of the city. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No ghosts in the walls. No memories stitched into the furniture. Just a blank space and a chance to start over. I painted the walls myself, even though I had no idea what I was doing. It was messy, imperfect. But it felt honest. Real. And maybe that's what I needed most, a life unpolished but genuine. There were still moments when it all came rushing back. A dream where she was still beside me. A flash of a memory in the middle of traffic. I didn't fight those moments anymore. I let them come. Let them sting. And then I let them pass. Because grief is not linear. It loops. It repeats. But it also fades if you let it. If you stop feeding it and start choosing yourself, even in small, quiet ways. I started writing. Just for me. Stories, reflections, the things I was too afraid to say out loud. It helped. There was something powerful in taking the chaos inside me and turning it into something structured, something that made sense. I didn't share any of it with the world, not yet, but it reminded me that I still had a voice. That betrayal hadn't silenced me. It had simply paused me. Now I was pressing play again. And slowly, I began to open up. A woman I met at a bookstore smiled at me one afternoon. Just a smile, nothing more. But it was enough to remind me that connection wasn't lost to me forever. I didn't rush. Didn't try to chase a replacement. I was learning to sit with myself, to enjoy my own company. To trust again, starting with trusting myself. That I'd know better next time. That I'd see the signs. That I'd never again shrink myself for someone else's ambition or lose my voice in the echo of someone else's lies. Emma never tried to contact me again. Not after that last night on my brother's porch. And I was grateful for that. Closure didn't come in a final conversation or an apology wrapped in a bow. It came in the silence that followed. In my own rebuilding. In waking up one morning and realizing I hadn't thought of her in days, and when I did, it no longer hurt. The betrayal didn't define me. It marked me, yes. Taught me. Hardened me in some ways. Softened me in others. But it wasn't the end of my story. Just the end of a chapter. One I had closed with clarity, dignity, and strength I didn't know I had. If you've ever been betrayed like I was, if someone you trusted tore your world apart with cold hands and false smiles, I want you to hear this. You will survive. You will rebuild. And someday you'll look back not with bitterness, but with pride. Because you made it through. Not because they came back. Not because they were sorry. But because you chose yourself. And that is the greatest revenge of all.